The woman you love never existed. She was built to control you. That sentence may feel like a slap to your soul, because everything you believed about love, about women, about what it means to be a good man, may have been a carefully crafted illusion. You thought you were building a partnership. You thought you were loving selflessly. You thought your sacrifices, your compromises, your constant emotional labor were signs of strength, of devotion. But what if all along you were slowly being domesticated, not by force, not by aggression, but by something far more dangerous, silent, emotional warfare? You didn't notice it. You never saw it coming. Because she never yelled. She never demanded. She simply shifted her moods, her affections, her emotional presence in ways that trained your behavior like a master shapes her pet. One quiet withdrawal when you make a decision she dislikes. One sudden burst of affection when you comply. One subtle expression of disappointment when you assert yourself. Little by little, you molded yourself into the man she wanted while calling it love. And here's the most brutal truth: you allowed it. Because you were taught to need her approval to feel like a man. This isn't about hating women. It's about finally seeing the game you never knew you were playing. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. Stay with me. Because what you're about to learn will either break you or set you free forever. You were never in love, you were being conditioned. That's the part nobody tells you. Because admitting it feels like betrayal. Like everything you believed, everything you built was a carefully designed lie. From the moment you were a boy, the world handed you a script: real men love selflessly. Real men sacrifice. Real men give without limit. You were told that love is about merging your identity with hers. That true intimacy means becoming one. That your worth as a man is measured by how much you're willing to surrender for her happiness. And you followed the script. Because you wanted to be good. You wanted to be chosen. You wanted to be worthy. But here's what no one ever prepared you for. Love was never neutral. It was never equal. It was never safe. Because behind the poetry, behind the romantic fairy tales, behind the emotional high lies, a subtle, invisible power exchange. You thought you were building connection. You were negotiating your own autonomy. Every time you compromised your boundaries, every time you silenced your opinions to avoid conflict, every time you put her emotions above your own, you weren't loving. You were being domesticated. This is the first illusion that sacrifice equals strength. In reality, you were slowly trading your leadership for approval, trading your vision for harmony, trading your masculinity for peace. And the more you gave, the less she respected you. Because in the currency of attraction, surrender isn't valuable. Sovereignty is. A man who gives everything loses himself. A man who keeps his center becomes unbreakable. And here's where most men fall. They confuse love with salvation. They believe if they give enough, endure, enough, prove, enough, she will finally feel secure enough to stop testing, to stop controlling, to stop pulling away. But that day never comes. Because you're not dealing with love. You're trapped inside a system of silent psychological warfare. And until you wake up, you will continue sacrificing your power in exchange for the illusion of being loved. Stay with me. Because this is just the first layer of the game you never knew you were playing. The most dangerous form of control is the one you never recognize until it's too late. You were never forced. You were never commanded. You were never given ultimatums. And yet somehow, your decisions began revolving around her. Your priorities shifted. Your time, your energy, your very identity started orbiting around her emotional state. This is not love. This is invisible emotional control. Here's the brutal truth. She doesn't need to control you directly. She only needs to condition your emotional responses. It starts subtly. You make plans to meet your friends. She doesn't forbid it. She simply grows distant. Her tone flattens. The warmth in her voice disappears. She says nothing, but says everything. The unspoken message: if you choose them, you lose me. You cancel, you stay, you adjust, not because she demanded, but because you couldn't handle the discomfort of her withdrawal. This is how emotional leverage works. Every choice that puts your purpose, your freedom, your autonomy first triggers a mild form of emotional withdrawal. She doesn't yell, she doesn't criticize, she simply pulls back affection. And in response, you bend, you compromise, you surrender. Not once, not twice, but over and over in hundreds of tiny moments. You call it being a good partner. You call it sacrifice for love. But what you're actually doing is training yourself to be emotionally dependent on her validation. This is how she creates the invisible leash. Obedience brings warmth. Independence brings coldness. It's a system of rewards and punishments that slowly rewires your brain. At first, you don't even notice. The changes feel small, insignificant, even logical. After all, you're only compromising for harmony. You're only putting the relationship first. But piece by piece, you're erasing yourself. Your hobbies fade. Your friendships weaken. Your ambitions shrink. Until one day you wake up and realize you don't recognize the man in the mirror. And here's the most terrifying part: she doesn't even have to do it consciously. Women are not evil masterminds plotting your demise. They've simply been trained by society to believe that emotional leverage is natural. Denied physical power throughout history, women evolved to master emotional power: subtle, quiet, devastatingly effective. Control without confrontation. Power without visible conflict. You see, domination by force triggers resistance, but domination by emotion triggers guilt. And guilt is a far stronger chain than any threat. Because guilt makes you chain yourself. You become your own captor, desperately modifying your behavior to maintain her approval. You stop living for your purpose. You start living for her comfort. And the deeper you sink, the more invisible the cage becomes. You believe you're free, but every major decision is filtered through one silent question: how will she feel about this? That is how invisible control destroys men from within. And unless you wake up, you'll keep calling your imprisonment love. Stay with me, because in the next chapter, I'll expose the uncomfortable reason why you allowed this to happen in the first place. You weren't forced into submission. You volunteered. That's the part that hurts the most, because it's easier to believe you were tricked, trapped, or manipulated. But the truth: you opened the door. You stepped into the cage willingly. Why? Because you were conditioned long before you even met her. Since childhood, you were handed a belief system, a silent doctrine passed down through family, culture, media, and society. A good man gives. A real man sacrifices. Love is proven through self-denial. You were taught to derive your value from being needed, from fixing, from rescuing, from protecting. The moment you feel a woman's need, her vulnerability, her emotional instability, something inside you awakens. Not your masculinity, your savior complex. You don't just want her. You want to be her hero, her stability, her source of safety. And that's where the trap begins. Because the more she appears unstable, the more you feel useful. The more she struggles, the more you feel important. The more she withdraws, the harder you chase. You confuse her neediness for intimacy. You believe that her emotional fragility makes your love meaningful. You believe that your endless emotional labor is proof of your strength. But in reality, you're not leading, you're being led. You've become addicted to her instability because it makes you feel necessary. You don't see that every time you jump to rescue, you're rewarding the very behavior that keeps you trapped. Every crisis becomes a hook. Every tear becomes a leash. Every dramatic episode is another chain disguised as an opportunity to be a good man. You sacrifice your ambitions, your friendships, your independence, not because she demands it directly, but because you believe that your love can fix her. But here's the bitter truth. She doesn't want to be fixed. She wants to be worshipped. Your endless sacrifices don't create security, they create leverage. The more you give, the more she controls. The more you adjust, the more she tests. The more you surrender, the more she rewires the relationship into a one-sided emotional economy where her instability equals your purpose. And you call it devotion. You call it commitment. You call it love. But what you're actually doing is feeding your own addiction to being needed. You're not her protector. You're her prisoner. And the worst part, you never even noticed because you were too busy trying to save her. Stay with me, because in the next chapter, we expose the most dangerous woman of all, the one who doesn't even look dangerous. The most dangerous woman is not the one who attacks you directly. It's the one who controls you gently. When most men hear about female manipulation, they imagine drama queens, emotional outbursts, screaming, and constant conflict. That's not where the real danger lies. The true master of psychological control wears a much softer mask. She appears kind, loving, supportive, gentle. She never demands. She never raises her voice. She never gives you clear ultimatums. And yet your entire world slowly starts revolving around her emotional state. Her control doesn't feel like control, it feels like responsibility. She positions herself as vulnerable, as fragile, as emotionally delicate. And because you were conditioned to see your role as protector, you instantly step into the trap. She doesn't say, "Don't do that." She simply withdraws affection when you do. She doesn't forbid you from your purpose. She softly questions, "Are you sure this is good for us?" You adjust not because you're forced, but because you fear disappointing her. Her sadness becomes your guilt. Her disappointment becomes your obligation. And slowly, you start editing yourself to maintain her emotional stability. This is what nature recognized as moral tyranny, the ability to control others, not by domination, but by activating their guilt, their shame, and their internalized sense of duty. The brilliance of this system is its invisibility. You can't point to any command she gave. You can't accuse her of being controlling because on the surface, she's doing nothing wrong. She doesn't rule by power, she rules by need. And the more emotionally responsible you feel for her, the deeper her control grows. You stop seeing your friends not because she told you to, but because you don't want to make her feel left out. You sacrifice your goals not because she demanded it, but because you want to support the relationship. Every decision becomes filtered through her emotions. How will she feel? Will this upset her? Will she be disappointed? You don't even realize it, but her emotional state has become the center of your decision-making. You're no longer leading your life. You're managing her moods. And the genius of this type of control is that you'll defend it. You'll say, "She's just sensitive." You'll say, "She just cares a lot." You'll say, "I'm doing it for love." But underneath that narrative, you've become a slave to invisible emotional conditioning. You don't feel trapped. You feel needed. You don't feel controlled. You feel responsible. You don't feel manipulated. You feel loved. But make no mistake, this is emotional warfare at its highest level. Stay with me, because next I'll show you how to break free from this invisible web and why most men never do. Her power over you ends the moment you stop needing her approval. This is where everything changes. This is where the invisible game begins to collapse. Because up until now, you weren't being controlled by her words, her actions, or even her emotions. You were being controlled by your own addiction to her validation. She didn't enslave you, you enslaved yourself. Every decision you made, every compromise you agreed, to every piece of yourself you surrendered was fueled by one silent craving: please keep loving me. You believed that maintaining her emotional stability was your duty. You believed that sacrificing your purpose was a sign of love. You believed that suppressing your own needs was noble. But here's the brutal truth. Your fear of losing her made you lose yourself. This is where most men stay trapped forever. in the endless cycle of sacrificing, pleasing, and adapting, hoping that one day she'll finally feel secure enough to stop testing, to stop withdrawing, to stop manipulating. That day never comes. Because as long as your happiness depends on her emotional state, you remain vulnerable. And as long as you're vulnerable, her power remains absolute. But what happens when you finally wake up? What happens when you realize that her happiness is not your responsibility? That's the great separation. It's not a physical separation. It's not about breaking up or walking away. It's an internal severing of emotional dependence. The moment you stop seeking her validation, she loses her grip. Suddenly, her withdrawal no longer triggers you. Her disapproval no longer shakes you. Her emotional storms no longer dictate your decisions. You become psychologically sovereign. For the first time, you stand as a man who no longer trades his identity for affection. You reclaim your time. You reclaim your boundaries. You reclaim your purpose, and she will feel this shift instantly. This is where her real test begins. Because when you no longer react to her emotional games, she's faced with two choices: rise with you. She respects your sovereignty, evolves, and meets you as an equal partner. Fight to regain control. She escalates, creates more drama, and intensifies emotional manipulation to pull you back into her orbit. And this reaction reveals everything you need to know about the true nature of your relationship. Was it love, or was it leverage? Most men will never reach this point, because cutting the cord of emotional dependency requires a level of inner strength that few possess. But if you have the courage to make this separation, you don't just free yourself from her control. You free yourself from every relationship that seeks to enslave you emotionally. This is the beginning of real masculine sovereignty. Stay with me. Because next we go even deeper into the test she'll throw at you once she senses her control slipping away. The moment you pull away, she doesn't surrender. She escalates. Make no mistake, emotional control doesn't vanish quietly. It fights back. The second you reclaim your sovereignty, when you stop chasing, stop pleasing, stop bending, she feels it instantly. And this is when the testing truly begins. Her first instinct won't be to adapt or grow. Her first instinct will be to regain control. Because for her, your emotional compliance wasn't just comfort, it was survival. Losing that control feels like losing oxygen. And so the escalation begins. Suddenly, the small emotional withdrawals turn into full-blown storms. Passive disappointment becomes explosive accusations. Quiet withdrawal turns into open guilt trips. You've changed. You don't care about me anymore. I guess I'm just not important to you. You're cold now. Distant. She weaponizes your empathy, knowing you were trained to feel responsible for her happiness. This is emotional blackmail, designed to pull you back into your old role. The irony: the more you grow, the more she fights to shrink you. Because your independence exposes her loss of power. She may even create crises that force your attention back onto her manufactured drama, sudden emotional breakdowns, unexpected emergencies that require your emotional labor. It's not coincidence, it's strategy. And if you're not prepared, you'll fall right back into the trap, comforting her, apologizing for your growth, sacrificing your boundaries to stabilize her emotions. And just like that, you're back on the leash. But this moment right here is the true test of masculine sovereignty. Can you hold your ground while she tests your strength? Can you resist the urge to fix, to rescue, to explain? Because if you yield, you signal that your growth was conditional, that your sovereignty is negotiable, that with enough pressure, she can always reclaim control, and the testing will never end. But if you stand firm, calm, grounded, unmoved, something powerful happens. She's forced to confront a terrifying reality. She can no longer manipulate you emotionally. Now she faces her own choice. Rise with you, evolve into a partner who values strength over submission. Seek a new savior, someone else willing to trade autonomy for affection. And that choice reveals her true nature. Most men never pass this test. They break at the first sign of emotional escalation, slipping back into the comfort of their old role. But if you endure, you break the cycle permanently. This is where true power is born. Stay with me. Because next we expose the deeper psychological addiction that traps men inside these toxic dynamics from the very beginning. You're not drawn to her because she's wounded. You're drawn because her wounds make you feel needed. This is one of the most dangerous psychological traps that silently enslaves men, and most don't even realize it's happening. You meet a woman who's fragile. Her past is full of pain, broken trust, betrayals, emotional scars. She opens up, shares her wounds, her trauma, her instability. And something inside you awakens, not lust, not love, but purpose. You don't just want her, you want to heal her. You want to rescue her from her broken past. This is the savior complex. You convince yourself, if I just love her enough, if I'm patient enough, if I support her through her pain, she'll finally become stable. But what if her instability isn't a wound to be healed, but a strategy to maintain control? Because here's the brutal reality. The broken bird always keeps you focused on her needs, not your purpose. Every time she spirals, you rush to comfort. Every emotional crisis becomes your responsibility. Her constant need for reassurance keeps your energy locked into her emotional world. And while you believe you're being a good man, you're actually being drained. Your mission shrinks. Your ambition fades. Your identity dissolves into the exhausting role of her emotional caretaker. This is not love. This is psychological codependency cleverly disguised as devotion. The more broken she appears, the more valuable you feel. Her instability feeds your ego, convincing you that you matter because you're needed. But need is not love. A truly healthy woman doesn't require you to save her. She brings her own emotional stability. She respects your mission. She supports your sovereignty. But that kind of woman often feels boring to men trapped in the broken bird dynamic because they've become addicted to the drama, the emotional highs and lows, the constant chase to stabilize someone else. The chaos feels like passion. The crisis feels like purpose. The drama feels like intimacy. But in reality, it's draining your masculine core. You are not her therapist. You are not her savior. You are not her emotional babysitter. Every time you take responsibility for healing her instability, you surrender a piece of your own sovereignty. And she learns, if I stay broken, I stay in control. This is not always conscious on her part, but the result is the same. You remain trapped in a never-ending cycle of emotional maintenance. Her crisis, your solution, her chaos, your sacrifice. And slowly you abandon your purpose to serve her endless emotional needs. But once you see this pattern, once you recognize that your need to be needed is fueling your own imprisonment, you can finally break free. You don't need to be needed. You need to be sovereign. Stay with me. Because next, we dismantle the most destructive lie that keeps men trapped in codependent love forever. They told you that true love means becoming one. They lied. This is one of the most seductive lies men are fed from the moment they start to understand love. That the highest form of intimacy is full emotional merging. That real relationships require sacrificing individuality for unity. That true love dissolves boundaries until there is no me or you, only us. But merging identities is not intimacy. It's mutual destruction. You think you're building connection. But what you're actually doing is surrendering sovereignty piece by piece. In this fusion model of love, you are praised for how much you give up. Your hobbies, your mission, your friendships, even your principles. Everything is negotiable as long as it keeps her happy. Every decision filters through the question, how will this affect us? But here's what they never told you. When you abandon yourself for her comfort, you don't build love, you build codependency. Both of you become trapped in a closed system. Her emotional needs consume your purpose. Your need for her validation consumes your identity. She becomes addicted to being prioritized. You become addicted to being needed. And the cycle reinforces itself. The more she pulls, the more you give. The more you give, the more power she holds. The more power she holds, the more your autonomy dissolves. You tell yourself, "I'm doing this for love. This is what a good man does." Sacrifice proves commitment. But deep down, you feel it. The resentment, the emptiness, the quiet erosion of who you once were. You wake up one day, no longer recognizing yourself. Your life revolves around maintaining her emotional stability. Your mission has been replaced by managing moods. And this is not partnership, it's mutual parasitism. Two incomplete people clinging to each other not out of strength, but out of mutual weakness. She fears standing alone, so she keeps you close through emotional leverage. You fear being alone, so you stay trapped, mistaking need for love. Real love does not demand you erase yourself. Real love respects sovereignty. True partnership happens when two complete individuals choose each other not because they need to, but because they want to. Love at a distance. Not distance of absence, but distance of sovereignty, where both bring their full self into the relationship without sacrificing identity. You don't lose yourself to love. You bring yourself fully into love. But very few ever experience this, because most men are too busy chasing validation, too terrified to risk standing alone. The myth of becoming one isn't love. It's the slow death of who you were meant to become. Stay with me. Because next we uncover why this myth is so terrifying to her and what happens when you finally break free from emotional fusion. The moment you stop needing her, she loses the only real power she ever had. When you start reclaiming your sovereignty, something profound happens in the dynamic, and she feels it instantly. Not because you say anything, not because you declare some bold boundary, but because your energy shifts. You no longer orbit around her moods. You no longer walk on eggshells. You no longer filter every decision through her emotional weather. You've stopped being emotionally available for her games. At first, she may act confused, surprised, even supportive. It's good to see you focused on yourself again. I love how driven you've become. I'm happy you're taking care of yourself. But underneath those words is an uncomfortable panic, because for the first time she no longer controls the levers of your behavior. Her withdrawal no longer triggers your fear. Her disappointment no longer sparks your guilt. Her mood swings no longer dictate your choices. You've severed the psychological leash. And this right here is what terrifies her most. Not your anger, not your distance, but your calm indifference to her emotional turbulence. You're no longer seeking permission to be yourself. Because her power was never about direct control. It was always about your compliance. The moment you stop complying, the game breaks. Now, she faces an internal crisis. Without your emotional dependency, who is she? Many women have unconsciously built their identity around being the center of a man's emotional world. His provider, his guide, his emotional sun. But you just took back your orbit, and she's left floating without the gravitational pull of your neediness to anchor her. That's why some will escalate. They'll create bigger crises, more emotional explosions, more accusations. You've become distant. You don't care anymore. You're cold. You're heartless. It's not love speaking. It's the panic of lost control. Because if she can no longer manipulate you emotionally, she's forced to face herself, and many are not ready for that confrontation. You've exposed her dependency on your dependency. But here's the paradox. The stronger you become, the fewer women can handle you. Because sovereign men are terrifying to those who rely on emotional leverage. They can't control you. They can't guilt you. They can't break you. And so many will leave not because you failed them, but because you no longer serve their unspoken agenda. But for the few women who are strong enough to meet you as an equal, this shift is magnetic. They're not afraid of your sovereignty, they're drawn to it. Because true partnership only exists between two complete individuals, not one caretaker and one emotional child. Stay with me. Because next we confront the most addictive illusion that traps men forever, the belief that sacrificing more will finally fix everything. When you no longer need love, you finally become worthy of it. This is the final transformation. This is the man most women never meet and most men never become. The sovereign man. A man who no longer chases validation. A man who no longer sacrifices his identity for affection. A man who no longer fears being alone because his completeness comes from within. You see, the entire game you've been trapped in was built on one weakness: your emotional dependency, your need to be chosen, your desperation to be approved, your obsession with being needed. That was the leash. And once you cut it, everything changes. Now you stand in your center, calm, grounded, unshakable. You no longer bend to emotional storms. You no longer modify yourself for someone else's comfort. You no longer confuse sacrifice with love. You give from abundance, not from emptiness. When you interact with women now, the dynamic reverses. You're no longer auditioning for approval. You're no longer reacting to their tests. You are observing calmly, silently, who is truly capable of standing beside you. Most women conditioned to control through emotional leverage will be terrified by this version of you. Because they can't move you, they can't guilt you, they can't manipulate you, they can't bait you with their moods. Their games collapse in the face of your stillness, and some will run. Not because you failed, but because your strength exposes their weakness. But the rare woman, the one who has done her own inner work, will recognize your value instantly. She doesn't need to control you. She doesn't need to break you. She doesn't need to test you, because she brings her own sovereignty to the table. Together, you don't merge identities. You don't lose yourselves in each other. You stand side by side, two complete individuals choosing partnership without sacrificing autonomy. This is real love. Love without fear. Love without power games. Love without emotional slavery. And here's the most profound truth. Only when you no longer need love do you finally become capable of receiving it. Because now, you love by choice, not by desperation. You're no longer drawn to broken women who need rescuing. You're no longer addicted to being needed. You're no longer vulnerable to emotional manipulation. You've become sovereign, untouchable. And in this state, you attract not women who need to be saved, but women who want to build. Strong meets strong. Complete meets complete. Stay with me. Because now we face the final illusion, the lie that tells men, if I just love her enough, I can fix everything. Most men will never make it here. But you did. You've seen behind the curtain. You've peeled back the layers of illusion that trap millions of men in silent emotional slavery. You no longer believe that love requires you to disappear. You no longer worship the false goddess of emotional dependency. You now understand the game you were never supposed to see. But knowledge isn't enough. Because what you do next, that's what separates sovereign men from the masses still begging for approval. You can choose the easy path, slip back into comfort, keep sacrificing, keep rescuing, keep chasing love like a starving beggar. Or you choose sovereignty, the path where you take full responsibility for your own emotional state, where you build yourself into a man who no longer needs permission to exist, where you love from strength, not weakness. And when you become this man, your entire reality shifts. You stop attracting broken women who want caretakers. You start attracting women who respect your strength and bring their own stability. Two complete souls, no saviors, no victims, no control. This is masculine freedom. This is psychological sovereignty. This is the path 99% of men will never walk. But you're not like most men. The question is, will you fully step into the man you were always meant to become? The choice is yours. But once you've seen the truth, you can never unsee it.